Got you, boy.
7 yards deep. Lets it go to the sideline. Tommy Hill.
Yo, what's up, guys? My name is Oliver Hayes alongside Harrison Simeon, and we are back for episode 2 of year 2. It's a little different. Even though we're in the same apartment this year, I unfortunately got COVID for my first time ever. So back to Zoom it is. But
Yeah, you're on the balcony. I'm just chilling in my room. I got all this medicine from when I had pneumonia coming to school, but now you're taking it all because you're the one that's sick now.
yeah, no, it's been tough, but still grinding, still getting through it, podcasting and whatnot. But obviously we're here to talk football among some other sports. But, you went to Nebraska, unfortunately, I guess.
I
But
wouldn't
tell
feel at
me,
all unfortunate.
tell me about that experience and what that was like.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't. It was unfortunate in terms of the actual game, but I had an incredible experience. I went with Trent, Roberto, and Talis, and our faculty advisor, Jake. And then we just kind of stayed in a motel for a couple nights, spent the day at the game, walked around Lincoln a little bit. It was a pretty Nebraska-ish town, about what I expected. But the one of the best parts was just the fan base. Like, as much as everyone in Colorado hates Nebraska, they have such an incredible fan base, and the experience at the stadium was so unique that, like, I don't think I'll ever be somewhere like that, at least for a long time, because like it was the largest stadium by capacity I've ever been in. The most amount of people that were in the same place at the same time that I've been at. And everywhere we went, there was Nebraska gear, there was um, there were people just supporting the team, just part of their daily life, getting ready for the game. Because it's such an important thing to them, just that football team, because of the tradition, the history behind it. So I had a great time. I happened to get on ESPN through one of our tweets and Bleacher Report on their Instagram and TikTok. Didn't get the greatest reception on our Twitter, and obviously as the game aged, it I saw a good one that said the tweet aged like milk on a hot day, and it was a pretty good summary for how that game went, and we can get into that now. I know you were home watching it from TV. Wasn't any less pretty in person or any less ugly in person than it was from home. But what was your experience and just your initial thoughts and some of from what you watched?
Well, it was interesting because last year, even during the away games, I often wrote the recap and so this was one of the first games in a while where I kind of just got to be a college kid, I guess. So that was fun. And watching it and not having to worry too much. But obviously, I've watched like the highlights back, as painful as that is, or lowlights, I guess. But but yeah, no, it was really just, I don't know. I've kind of called it Oregon 2.0 a little bit. Just because it had the same feeling of just straight out the gate, you immediately knew that game was over. And it came from, the first play that was, a run for nothing, I think it was. And then a LeJohntay Wester drop that could have, been 5 yards, even though he ended up having a decent game, like in the second half. He made some good catches and had the touchdown. Um, but immediately after that drop, you're just like are the Buffs ready for this? Are they ready for the moment? With that crazy environment that you mentioned, and from there on, then Shador gets sacked, so easily, and you're just like, wow, like I didn't really have the words to just describe like how to feel in that moment because immediately my mind was like, this game's over. They obviously have the same issues from last year. The offensive line can't block. They're completely rattled. And then, Nebraska goes down the field and scores. Shador throws a pick six. That was probably the worst throw of his Colorado career, if I had to guess. That looked completely unlike him. And it was just, obviously from there, kind of, still just went downhill. The second half was much better, of course, with the defense, but obviously, it's not like Nebraska's gonna come out and you know, keep attacking. They're mostly just looking to, run the clock out and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, a lot of stuff that, I pretty much just gave the recap, but I mean, there was just a lot of stuff that looked a lot like last year. There's a lot of stuff that people have already brought up and discussed. And so it's more so, at this point, kind of, wondering how they're gonna address these issues that they supposedly fixed over this offseason heading into, another rivalry game that at this point looks like they could very easily lose if they keep up, these same struggles.
Yeah, no, I mean, just being there and watching that all unravel felt like I tend to be the guy that always makes the video game references, but just overall, like it was the crowd meter. I forget why am I
Yeah, the
forget.
stadium pulse.
Stadium pulse was jacked all the way up. All the routes were squiggly, like we couldn't, or the Buffs couldn't really do anything that they wanted to, and we, and in terms of me and Trent, were just not looking too great the whole game. Just frustration after frustration, and watching how Colorado just really couldn't get anything going from the jump. And then obviously the defense looked better, but you have to take into account Nebraska kind of taking their foot off the gas and not you know playing as physical as they did in the first half, which is something the Buffs are going to have to deal with, um, you know, very early on again. I wanted to get to the press conferences to ask, how can you deal with that kind of early physicality when you've seen time and time again the Buffs just struggle to deal with those teams that like to start really fast, unless it's like against NDSU where they were fast and just pushing the ball down the field. But if you don't have time to push the ball down the field, you're going to see, you have to be methodical out the gate. You're going to have to see a much higher level of physicality that they've had, as we look forward to Colorado State. Um, you're going to have to be intense off the jump and not have to rely on Shador and Travis Hunter to make every play. And I think that starts with play calling. I mean, you saw only one design run the whole first quarter, that first play. And then I think you had, maybe there were four design runs the whole first half, and one of them was a 2-yard loss on a run from shotgun from Charlie Offerdahl. Like I think it comes down to play calling and just the design, because I mean they like to go with those RPOs, but offensive line has to be super communicative. And we saw in Nebraska that they just weren't. I mean, you saw 16 pressures allowed by the tackles by Tyler Brown and Jordan Seaton. Seaton, I didn't see as him having a terrible game, and more just a lot of times he was left out on an island against a really tough physical, edge rusher. I thought Nebraska's defensive line was really impressive. Tyler Brown, more so, he's just kind of out of his element. He's, always been a guard. There were rumors that they were going to put him at center. So moving him from the interior to the exterior, um, in that situation, I can say that the Buffs are regretting it now, and we'll see if they can realign things for CSU. But no changes to the depth chart. We saw there were some rumors of practice where Philip Houston took over at right tackle, and they moved Brown to left guard. I don't. That's yet to be seen if that's actually true. But I think just the alignments and the play calling is going to need to be better against CSU for Colorado have a chance in arguably their most important game of the Coach Prime era to this point.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I agree with everything you said, and I going to the play calling aspect, that definitely is where everything starts because, after that, even just the first drive, of course, that's only 3 plays, but they had nothing on that first drive, and then obviously the second drive was immediate pick six. But I mean, throughout that first half, it was consistent. Those, you bring up those quarterback hurries, you bring up the sacks and all those things, and the one design run and Shador being under pressure. Um, and there were just no. It was like Shermer didn't have any like counters for that. He had his game plan, was like saw it got stopped and was like, oh well. And I think like but I think like, I think with Colorado it's a little bit easier to do that. With just how talented these guys are, and a lot of times you don't want to deviate from the game plan, especially if it's something you prepared all week and you trust, your guys to go out there and execute. But at a certain point, like, you know, you bring up the running stats where, they only have the few like four organized runs in the first half. And I think it was I need to look exactly how many like running back rushes there were. Um, it looks like there were 11 total, and
5 for Hayden is crazy. I mean, he still managed. To be fair, it was kind of when they eased up and they ran some stuff out of pistol that I was like, where has this been all game? We're down 28-10. They're running stuff out of pistol finally. But
yeah,
yeah, Dallin Hayden needs more touches. That's just my 2 cents. Go ahead.
yeah, no, exactly, and it's just I don't know. It was really just insane. Like, how can you only run the ball, 11 times, especially when you go into the press game, you know, you go into the post game press conference and Dion says that he wants to run the ball more and that his backs are talented enough to do so. And then, it just doesn't happen. And then, you see all your offense just not working at all. And you still decide, to go to the run. And even when they did, a lot of times, like you wrote about in your article, but it was an inside zone concept. And it was just, straight up the middle for nothing. And it was, they ran on a fourth down twice and got stuffed twice. They did it against NDSU and got stuffed. And so it's just, at a certain point, it's like where, when, how can they deviate from the offense and when will they do so? Because, obviously when Shador drops back to pass and he's under pressure, it's like, I don't know. My dad texts me, he's like, why aren't they rolling the pocket? Obviously they can't protect him. So, maybe you should, get a little mobile and, try and favor some of the guys that are going to constantly getting beat. So I don't know. I can't say necessarily where to go because it is tough when your offensive line is having the struggles that CU's offensive line is having right now. That is tough because if you need an offensive line to run the ball, so why would you run the ball if your offensive line is trash? But at this point, they need to do something different. I can't say exactly what it is, but you know, it just needs to be different from what they're doing because obviously that doesn't work. And if CSU can go out there and stop them, and kind of punch them in the mouth like they did last year and have all the, they talked about how last year that, CU was more of a mystery in week 3, where at this point they've had a full year of just watching the same exact thing and now 2 games of watching the same thing. I'd fully expect CSU to have a game plan, to stop this redundant offense at this point.
Yeah, and they're gonna come out hungry too. I mean, you have a whole year to sit on getting, that chippy game where they were underdogs by about 4 touchdowns, I remember, and they came out almost beat us, had to go to double overtime. So
Honestly, they should have beat us. Like
yeah,
they played better than Colorado.
yeah, no, they did, and they outplayed us in a lot of aspects, and so they're gonna remember that. And it's a lot of the same players, same quarterback who was making his first start last year, and Braden Fowler Nicolosi, and then Torrey Horton, who put up 133 yards, 16 catches on us last year. So that's going to be the connection to obviously watch out for. But that's an entire team that had a year to sit on that chippy game that all the storylines going into it, Jay Norvell, and then coming out of it, um, you know, us the Buffs still just being really excited and going forward, and then immediately getting humbled the next week by Oregon, which, like you said, Nebraska was kind of the 2.0 of last, from last year to this year. So I think it's going to be up to the creativity of the offense and defense because you're going to be without Shiloh Sanders. You haven't forced any turnovers through 2 games. And the Buffs they've only had 2 sacks as well. So you've got to be able to make plays on defense and on offense. You have to be more multidimensional than you've been. I mean, obviously, you can just say, we're going to balance the run, trust us, we're going to balance it. We have good running backs, but there's the say and the do. Like there has to be some sort of change to be made already, even though we're only 2 games in still. You have the feeling that this is much more obviously a must win and a must dominate type of game for anyone to have any sort of faith for the Buffs going into the Big 12 schedule.
Yeah, no, definitely. And yeah, I mean at this point, like I don't really have, too much more to add about Nebraska. Like I said earlier, a lot of this stuff has already been said. And so I mean, looking forward to CSU. One thing that I've kind of been surprised about is the I don't know, almost the nonchalant attitude I feel like Colorado had in comparison to last year. I kind of felt that way, like even, them heading into, during last week ahead of Nebraska, I felt like it was, nonchalant and Jimmy Horn kept his consistent, hatred for red, but last year I remember Xavier Weaver talking about it and how important it was, to hate red and how they've really been emphasizing that. And I remember Jimmy Horn saying that, the same thing and Coach Prime, of course, like, had his comments and they were stepping on the logo and all that stuff. And it was really weird just not seeing that at all, last week and then heading into to this week, you know, Prime of the Bus have taken a lot more of like the high road for like a lack of a better way of putting it. And I don't know, it's really interesting seeing that, knowing that this is probably, the biggest game of, the Coach Prime era to date because, it's the back to back of a rivalry um or back-to-back rivalry games. You already lost the second installment of the one that you won last year. And like you said, it was again, like we agreed upon earlier, it was, they lost to or they beat CSU in a game that they should have lost last year, with how they played. And so I don't know. It's interesting seeing the approach, I guess, especially when I asked Dion, like, how do you scout this team? And he was kind of just like, they just do a lot of things well and they're consistent. Like, okay, obviously, that's a very coachy answer. He doesn't want to offer too much, but you also just, you got to wonder when he comes out and, his biggest worry is about the fight song and how journalists are doing their job instead of, discussing the game plan or talking about, emphasizing this rivalry or anything like that. It's just interesting to see, putting last year and this year side by side. That's a difference that I can see, between the two teams, I guess.
Yeah, no, I mean, the Buffs are in a pretty bad spot right now, and about as bad of a spot, even during that long losing streak last year, which I think has kind of dipped the morale of a lot of some of the players. I mean, guys like Jimmy Horn, like you said, have stayed consistent, but right now we're in a position where we have about we're the reason we're discussing how important this game is because we have essentially everything to lose but almost nothing to gain. And that's about as bad of a spot as you can be as a football team because you're playing an opponent that also has nothing to lose and just about everything to gain. They we haven't traveled to Fort Collins for the Buffs in the Buffs haven't traveled to Fort Collins in I think 10 years now, and they haven't Colorado State hasn't beaten us in quite a while or beaten the Buffs in a long time either. So I think they're going to come out with guns blazing to, try to pounce on a team that has very little, I guess, life right now and just kind of wandering aimlessly besides the identity that's always been Coach Prime and Shador Sanders, Travis Hunter, like the superstars, the top of the line, at their position kind of personalities. So I think for the Buffs, you have to treat it as, any other game. Even though it's a rivalry, you have to go into it hating the opponent like no opponent you've ever hated before. You have to you can't fold to the moment again because just like last week when you encounter that big crowd, the first rivalry road environment of the Coach Prime era, they folded. There's no other way to put it. As many, positives you could take away in terms of the defense, in terms of Travis Hunter still having 100 yards, they weren't ready. They weren't prepared. So now you have to just prepare like this is a game that's extremely important, But, we'll talk about recent news in terms of Colorado State going to the Pac-12. That's another aspect that could add some morale into that locker room. And so they can feel confident enough to give the Buffs bulletin board material and mess around and make it personal, like what Nicolosi and Horton said yesterday, I believe. And, let's see how far Instagram followers take you, or and just kind of poking at the culture that is currently going on right now, whether the narratives are true or not. So I think you have to just treat it as business as usual, but you also have to go into it knowing the history of the rivalry, knowing how important this game is, and just for your dignity's sake and for the outlook of the team, and just find a way to win. As long as you find a way to win, you just keep moving and you play another opponent in Baylor the next week that is a bit aimless as well. You come back home, you feed off that energy, and then you just try to build that back up.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. There are some parts that like I think I don't know. I kind of disagree with just because like I don't know. Like we mentioned, like this is the biggest game, and so while I do understand, like you don't want to freak out and treat it like the craziest thing, and then be undisciplined as they have been, and just let the moment get to them and then fold, as you said. You obviously don't want that to happen, but I feel like there does need to be like there is that significance, like you said, that needs to be placed on this game. And I think there does need to be the realization that if they don't win this game, like there are going to be serious implications and serious things that like they're going to need that like things that they already need to address, but you know, that are just going to be almost out of control at a certain point because like I don't know. Before the Nebraska game last year, before the Colorado State game last year, obviously coming off of big wins, they're talking that talk as Dion always has, and with of this lack of chatter this year, especially with some of the things that have been said. It's just interesting because like I don't know, the only difference is Colorado has only won one game in the last, what is it, 8? I think it is.
Yeah.
um, and so it's just like when they've done that and they don't have the same approach as they did last year, I feel like that's very worrying as someone who covers the team. I feel like that's like worrying the fans. I feel like that should be worrying, players and recruits. And, like you said, it's a very bad place to be in when, you have everything to lose, but really nothing to gain because this should be a game that, Dion and the Buffs win because of the talent that they have, at the quarterback position and, in their receiving room and, even in their running back room, they said that they have talent. It looks like, unfortunately doesn't look like he's going to play for the Buffs, which is really going to hurt them. So maybe it's Michael Welch, stepping up. I'm sure it's probably going to be Isaiah Augustov instead, but either way, I don't know. There's just it's just very odd seeing this approach. And I think they do need to not let they can't let the pressure get to them, obviously, but they need to play this game like you know they need to play this game like it will make or break their season, and like a lot of them for them like, it will make or break their careers. Because for Shador at least, you know, NFL executives that were high on him last year have already gone back on their word and things like that. And so, you know, I agree for the most part, but I do think they just need to go balls to the wall and literally treat this like the Super Bowl, no matter how embarrassing that is. Because at a certain point, if they want to win the games that they talk about winning, they need to, win the biggest one, I think that could be of this year.
Yeah, no, I definitely see that point. And I, yeah, I kind of retract a little bit of just treating it as any other game because it's not. Like you can't treat something as it's not. You have to, face reality and stay focused in it. So I think focus is going to be a huge part of this game. If they, don't get rattled by the crowd, that they need to, not get caught up with penalties or getting chippy. As it's a rivalry game, which obviously, getting chippy could instill some life in your team. but I think you need to go into it with just razor sharp and at least get off to a good start and just let the talent take you the rest of the way because this team has so much talent. And at this point, you can't waste it. And if you lose this game, it's going to look like a lot more of last season's collapse carrying into this year. Just, that would put the Buffs in a spot where everyone, I mean, that's kind of already is, where people are selling their stock. The national media that was all on the hype train last year are completely down on us now. And it's going to be something to watch um, if Colorado can just come out with more life than they usually do in these games. Because even against North Dakota State, you had the touchdowns you could score, but you couldn't really take control against an opponent you should. So against Colorado State, I'm really looking for them to try to take control early, and that starts with, the creativity and just the faith in the personnel to be able to step up and not to be over reliant on any one person or any one connection, but to just play cohesively and I think that starts with both coaching, the creativity, and just the belief of the players in individually, and just to rely on the guy next to him to make the play. And if things go wrong on the first drive or two, to not be rattled by that moment and know that you still have every capability possible to win the game.
Yeah, so I don't know, we've talked about the offense a lot. And kind of going against CSU, they've had two games on opposite ends of the spectrum as far as, the caliber of their opponent and the outcome of those games as well. And so it's kind of hard to see, where some of the weaknesses may be with this Colorado State team, but you know, going to the defensive side of things where they have some things to address. Obviously, no Shiloh Sanders. Trevor Woods, not starting. Nikkei, who, okay. You know what? I'm not even going to try that one, even though I know how to say it.
Nakai Hilgreen.
Nikai Hilgreen. There we go. But anyway, Nikai Hilgreen is starting. So changes on the defensive side of the ball. And last year, I think, Fowler Nicolosi, I think he threw 3 interceptions. If I'm not mistaken, one of them being a Shiloh pick 6. And that being his first start, like you said earlier. So, with all those things being said, to change it, slight shifts on the defensive side of the ball, Fowler presumably not going to throw 3 picks in this game. At least I'd assume not. With a Colorado team that has forced 0 turnovers to this point into the year, while, last year they had already forced 7, I think it was. Where on the, how does Colorado approach this game on the defensive side of things, with a seemingly upgraded Braden Fowler, Nicolosi, and Torrey Horton?
Yeah, no, I think that will have to start with how they, again, kind of just comes down to scheme, because maybe I've said it before in this podcast, but where you lack in talent, you can make up for in scheme. And I think along the D line, there has to be some better ways that they find to get to the quarterback, because from what I've seen, it's just been kind of base rush 4, base rush 3, and not a whole lot of, maybe there's some zone blitzes mixed in, but to try to get to the quarterback as we haven't, you realize that, these edges are really talented, but they also need some help. They can't go and beat a double team or beat, uh, you know, strong O-line play and max protect on their own. So it's gonna be something to look out for, to see how they mix up the blitzes and mix up getting to Fowler Nicolosi, who's still a, relatively young quarterback with less than a season, or I guess combined with this season, about one full college year under his belt. I'm gonna look to the linebacker room. I know you mentioned Trevor Woods no longer starting. He will be still in dime looks, wasn't suspended due to the targeting because it happened at the end of the first half rather than the second. So, how does he get involved? How much dime do they mix in to get different looks? Um, the defense itself is going to come down to just how they start and just the mentality that they attack the Rams with. Um, and I think if the scheme can help that for them, then they can be really successful. And eventually, I know BJ Green said the dam is about to break in terms of getting the quarterback. And hopefully the dam is about to break in terms of forcing turnovers too. So I think it'll be on some of the linebackers to still get adjusted. They're only, 2 games into their new situations. And I'm going to look to see if some of the players I've doubted through these 2 games can prove me wrong. Because for me, DJ McKinney has not looked impressive at all at corner. He looked fine against North Dakota State, but they weren't throwing to the perimeter very much. That wasn't their game plan. And when Nebraska went to the perimeter, I saw McKinney struggle a lot. Preston Hodge, I see him fit into the run game pretty well, but at slot corner, I haven't been that outwardly impressed. So these are marquee additions from the transfer portal that were supposed to help this defense improve as a whole. And it's almost and as last year we discussed, the run game was the difficulty in stopping um, offenses for the Buffs. This year it's been some of the pass. And when you have an offense that can mix it around, and be multidimensional as the Buffs offense, on the contrary, hasn't been, um, it's going to be really, really important to at least stop one area. So if they can stuff the run early, then the game plan can shift to the pass, and that's how the Buffs can hone in and make plays, put more into coverage, lighten up the boxes some to dare Colorado State to go away from what they initially were stopped at. And that can mess with their psyche. And I think that can help the Buffs win if they can get off to that good start. And that's why starting fast for a defense is so incredibly important, and why Nebraska almost became not even a game 5 minutes in. After that pick six, everyone just the life was sucked out of the locker room and the Buffs entirely. And so I think if the defense can feed into the offense through getting off to a fast start, that can take a lot of pressure off Shador and Travis to play catch up later on.
Yeah, definitely. Um, so I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how the defense shows up. Um, you know, hopefully they can get the pressure and the turnovers that they have lacked for, 2 weeks to start this year. Um,
That wasn't the case last year, at least for turnovers.
yeah, no, I mean
That was
it's
what made the defense, still viable, though it ended up not really carrying through a whole season, obviously. So I
yeah,
think it's going to come down to just the playmaking ability of all these guys, because we've seen Cameron Sillman Craig be an amazing playmaker. We've seen, though he's going to be hurt for the next few weeks, Shiloh be a great playmaker. Um, Levante Bentley can really, be a rock in the middle of that defense and muddy everything up. So I think it's going to come down to just the ability to make plays, the schematics that allows some of the less talented areas of the defense to thrive, and the mentality of starting fast.
yeah. No, and I think like I don't know, one thing that may be helpful for this Colorado defense is the fact that Dallin Holker, drafted to your Saints. Was
Yeah.
was he drafted or was he undrafted?
He was an undrafted free agent.
Okay,
He
that
made the
makes sense.
roster, so he's like our third string tight end right now. Or
Okay,
maybe fourth. I don't know. We have a lot for some
gotcha.
reason.
Well, anyway, for some reason I thought he was drafted, and then once I said it, I was like, was he? But anyway, he moved on. But he had a great game last year. Obviously, any tight end seemed to have a great game against the Buffs last year. But I mean, 6 catches for 109 yards and 2 touchdowns is a pretty insane stat line. average of 18.2 yards per catch. So you know, Colorado, we'll have to see if that issue of crossing of stopping the middle pass or passes to the middle of the field. If that issue pertains, obviously we saw it against NDSU, but that just seemed more of a focus of keeping the ball off that from the outside. But you know, I think that would be one thing that would be helpful is just not having to deal with Dallin Holker, running amok, up in the middle of the field on those crossing routes that where I feel like you know Colorado State last year was the team that really, really exposed that issue in the Buffs defense, and so it'll be interesting with some new players, and a new coordinator, trying to stop this, CSU offense. Um, but
One
I
little
mean,
I wanted to go back to, like, really quick note on back to my focus point. Henry Blackburn is still on the team. He'll still be on the field. So I think it's very important for the Buffs to avoid being distracted by any of it. Like, he's just another safety. He got beat by Jimmy Horn, so they know they can, it's not like he's some amazing player that they're going to have to throw to it all the time, or they're going to have to avoid it all the times, but just avoiding him in the memory of him taking out Travis with that hit last year, not to get caught up in that, because I think you need to just play the game naturally. And if it gets chippy naturally, then so be it, but not to force anything into to Blackburn or anything like that, because that can show that the opponent's getting in your head already.
yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, obviously, I think things will get chippy. Colorado is kind of a chippy team, and especially after the nature of what last year looked like, it. I feel like I'd be hard pressed to not expect this game to be chippy and to get out of hand at some points. Um, and so I don't know. I think that is a good to bring up the Blackburn hit. That is an interesting thing because that hit happened pretty early on in the game. Travis only had 2 catches to that point. So obviously Colorado didn't have the offensive production from him. But then the defensive production as well. Like, how does that game unfold if Travis is guarding Torrey Horton for the whole game? And things like that. I think that's a really interesting point. To kind of, bring up is just how will, Travis play, assuming that he stays healthy this whole game. Like, I don't know. What do you think the expectations for him are? I mean, I feel like it's kind of hard to place expectations because he just seems to exceed them. But, um, you know, how do you think, he'll play?
Well, I think some people's expectations are different than mine, because I feel like, with that in mind, that he wasn't on the field for the vast majority of the game, for him to maybe completely limit Torrey Horton's production, um, on his own. But I think what we'll do is probably double Horton, because I mean he's one of the not just he didn't just kill the Buffs, he's killed almost everybody. He's been one of the best receivers in the country, one of the more underrated names, um, on the perimeter for any college. So I think it's important to not, if he gets his, he gets his. And I think it's not Travis's responsibility to be the savior of this team. And that's sometimes how it's been, where it's like, Travis, please save the Buffs. We know what you can do, so we just have to, on both sides, hope that he can be 100% at everything. But for my expectations, I still think he should be the number one target of Shedeur Sanders, because they have that connection dating back to Jackson State. But also, you know, with him playing at corner, at least just doing his part. I mean, he looked pretty good against Nebraska. He's looked pretty good in both games at corner. So I think it shouldn't be his entire responsibility to carry us to a win, because we have talent elsewhere that just hasn't really been unlocked yet, in some phases. But I think, for my expectations, I think he should be, the focal point of the offense, but also, there's always the chance we can use him as a decoy at some points, or that can get guys like Will Shepherd involved, guys that haven't been as involved in the offense that you'd want to get the ball because they're so talented. If that can open up a spot for maybe, hey, I have a crazy idea. I don't know if you ever heard of this, but a pass to a tight end. That's something that the Buffs, obviously don't do. I mean, we're playing kind of a converted defensive lineman at tight end already, but if that can open up the offense, just his presence on the field, that's all I think he needs to do. Because I know when he does get the ball, which he's inevitably going to, he can be extremely special for Colorado.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see, that Horton Hunter matchup on the defensive side of the ball, but then, hopefully just to see, like, I don't know, I feel like just from a football fan standpoint, like, why would you not want to see Travis Hunter on the field making plays? So, it'll be fun to see what he's able to do, and hopefully that dancing that he did that, got SBS a little viral, can translate to the CSU game, and he can back it up. Um but yeah, I don't know. One thing that I think is kind of interesting just looking through the stats is against CSU last year, Colorado ran for 70 yards on 25 attempts. And so, I don't know, not a lot of runs. That's one of the in comparison to last year, that's uh they're tied for the fourth lowest amount of attempts per game, but obviously more than more than this year and it, obviously more attempts than any game this year.
That game
But they
also went
ran.
double overtime.
That is
So
true. That is true.
taking that into account, that's not very many.
Yeah, like it's still not a crazy amount, but more than what we ran, than what Colorado has ran this year, which says a
Yeah.
lot. But the point that I wanted to bring up is even though they still only averaged 2.8 yards a carry, 70 yards, which was their fifth highest amount of rushing yards. So you know if there is a game so far to break out the running game and test it, I mean, Colorado State might be the one to try it on. At least, I mean, I obviously, I think everyone agrees that they should just try it anyway, even if it sucks and it doesn't work. But, I think there is a little bit of optimism that, hey, maybe, it does break through and something happens. But I don't know. At this point, I feel like we've kind of, touched on everything. Do you have any final thoughts about the football team, or are we on the go to other sports?
I think we're on the go. I did want to do something we forgot to in our first episode. It was which is a score prediction. We
Oh,
we I know I'll have a score prediction because I'm probably going to be anchoring on the live show tomorrow. Um, but I wanted to do a score prediction because this is a very hard to predict game for me. So I was wondering what you were thinking, at least right now.
I feel like I don't know. I don't honestly don't expect that close of a game. If I'm being honest, I feel like either one team is gonna run away with it. Um, like I feel like the Buffs are either gonna come out and be like, yeah, this is who we are. Like we're actually a solid team and we did improve, and they're gonna win by a lot. Or CSU is really just gonna take advantage of a team that's down bad, already kind of licking their wounds, and CSU kind of has a chance to kick them while they're down. And so I think, with that being said, uh, you know, I think it is kind of a toss up at this point to see who wins, but I think Colorado is just too talented. Um, and at least, Dion didn't want to say that they were the same team as last year, but he said they're very consistent. So I think it will be the Buffs will be ready for this CSU team and like what they look like, and I don't think CSU has necessarily improved drastically, even though their stars may have gotten better. And so I don't know. In that case, I guess I'll lean toward the Buffs in a blowout. I guess we'll just say like probably like 42 or 45 to maybe like 32 or something like that.
Okay.
Something extra. Like CSU is still going to put up some points,
Yeah, you
but
said
nothing crazy.
blowout. I was thinking like 42-3 or something.
No, not that crazy, but I mean a multiple score win like
Yeah.
for the Buffs. But I think like on the higher side. If not though, I would expect CSU to kind of go in the opposite direction. Like I said, I'm not really expecting a close game.
Yeah.
That's my big thing.
Yeah, so 42-32. I can't remember a
I'll say
30.
45-32.
Okay.
So it is,
A little bit more blowout-y.
yeah.
Yeah, for me it's tricky and you had a really good question. You got a good question from Coach Prime when you asked him how do you prepare for a game where the team got blown out by one of the best in the country in Texas and then blow out the other team in Northern Colorado. So it's going to be tricky to know like what is the median between those two and how does that stack up to the matchup against us, um, or Colorado. But for me, I think it'll come down to how close our offense looks, and then if or which offense walks into Fort Collins on Saturday. Is it going to be the one that was in the first half against North Dakota State, or is it going to be the one that walked into Nebraska and kind of wet the bed? So but I do think it's going to be more towards North Dakota State, and I think the Buffs will be watching a lot of those, what we've talked about, and I think the Buffs will kind of follow through. I think I'm going to see a little bit of life, and I think overall Colorado is going to win it 31-20, 31-24 by a touchdown. And it's kind of a basic score, but yeah.
No, I feel like that makes sense. I mean, like you said earlier, I mean, any game's hard to predict, but I feel like this game in particular is really hard. Having just seen kind of like, yeah, I don't know, just through this point, and in professional sports, you don't see, this kind of weird of the weirdness of college football, and like this the strength of schedules and things like that, and the week to week changes and whatnot. But I think I think one thing that I kind of forgot to mention, that kind of gives like makes me lean more towards CU in this game is also just because even though it's an away game, like I don't know, that field looks pretty. It looks like a big stadium, but I've never really seen, Colorado State, uh, you know, pack it up and have it rocking, um, you know, anywhere near Nebraska. I mean, Nebraska is, that's one of a kind, of course. But I mean, you know, it's not gonna, I think, for the Buffs, it's gonna feel maybe more like a home game, I guess, in comparison to what the Nebraska environment was, just because, the Buffs fans are gonna travel. CSU hasn't really shown that they, can pack that stadium too much. Granted, I
Besides
haven't
for
like
this game, like that hasn't happened in Fort Collins too often, so I figure it'll be a sellout.
yeah, like it definitely is going to be packed. Like there's going to be a lot of CSU fans, but there's going to be a lot of Colorado fans as well.
Yeah.
And you know, I think just like even if it was all CSU fans, like that's still just so like that's just still just as just the pure numbers, just a significant margin fewer than uh you know what they face in Nebraska. So I think that will be something that is will work in their favor is that the artist environment they'll play in this year. I think they've kind of already played in. Um,
Yeah,
you know
that is good.
maybe maybe Arrowhead or something will be interesting, but still like I don't know. We'll see, I guess, but
I'm
I don't know. I think.
This is gonna be a fun game. It's gonna be. I'm a little nervous about it. I've never been nervous as someone who covers a team, but I am a little bit I do wonder just about all the storylines that could pour out if Colorado loses this game because it could get pretty ugly pretty quick. And you're already kind of seeing it
Yeah.
because I've
No.
never something I mentioned, I talked to Patrick yesterday is it's just tricky when you look at some of the storylines that follow this team in that I've never seen a fan base that can where every story or something that happens about it is so polarizing that there's, one side of the fan base that's considered the new fans, the Coach Primes, and then the diehards, the oldies, and everything like that. So it's going to be tricky, but I'm hoping that the two sides can kind of come together and kind of push towards a win against the big rival for Colorado because this is a fan base where I have zero connection to. I've never had a connection to. You obviously have because you've lived here, but the fans are in a bad spot as well as the team itself. So it's going to be something to watch, and I'm looking forward to Saturday night. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, I think we desperately need to head into the other sports, but the one last thing I'll bring up, I was listening to um the Locked On Buffs podcast. I think Kevin Borba is the host of that. Um and he made a good point um about just about the state of the Buffs and how I don't know, we've kind of already talked about this earlier and like specifically me with the whole trash talking point. Um but it is interesting how like if this were any other college football team, it would not matter, I guess. Like that much. Like there's plenty of football teams out there that went, got by in their first game, uh, and then have gotten blown out in their second game. And, maybe not as drastic in the, ways that Colorado has been this year, but it's just he brought up the point of just the amount of talk, the amount of show, the amount of flash, the amount of just all these things that just surround Colorado. And so, you know, it is there is definitely like those things about of like, that you bring up where it is kind of, Colorado isn't treated the same. And there's a lot more, things surrounding this and that makes you really nervous for a game like this. And I think it's just, especially worse when it's not like, obviously there's a little aspect of fans hyping up Colorado before, just because of Dion and things like that. But it's also like, you can't hate on Dion's personality. That's what you're gonna get when you hire him. Like that's the full expectation. But it is a little, it's a little crazy seeing all the things that, he said and making points about keeping receipts and things like that are just, I'd say put the target on the back, but as a Joe Mazzulla fan, I think that, it's on the back. They haven't won nothing, so I wouldn't say the red dots between the eyes, but I'd say the target's on the back for sure, and they definitely put it there. And so, I thought that was an interesting point that, Kevin Ward brought up on his podcast, and it's just everyone knows it. It's not anything new. It's just, interesting to think about and, the grand scheme of the situation that the Buffs are in.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, at that point, you bring up a really good point about just, how the state of the team right now and how, you knew what you were getting when you hired Coach Prime and you knew you're going to get a very, very confident unit. And if that didn't translate to winning, there was going to be some discontent. So, um, we're going to see how Colorado can respond to all the flurry and all the outside noise heading into Saturday on the sequel, the Rocky Mountain Showdown. Though it will be a long time before these two teams face off again, I believe until 2029. Um, but we'll pivot all the way from all that football talk into some of the other sports because we have some teams that have been winning, I guess. I mean, it's only 1-1, but the soccer team has been doing incredibly well for Colorado in these last few weeks. Just going to be starting conference their Big 12 era, I guess, and their conference schedule tonight against Kansas State. But what can you say? You've been to a lot of the games. What can you say about these last few? Weber State and I believe it was Denver. You were at that one. What can you
Yeah,
tell me about that Denver game and how the season's played out so far?
I would just say that the Buffs, I feel like their defense has been really great. Jordan Knights, she just won her second Big 12 goalkeeper of the week, of 2024. I think it's her third overall because she won it, once as a freshman when she was at Oklahoma State. But she's been fantastic. I think she's second in shutouts or something like that in the Big 12. Um, with five and I think that's really kind of where it all starts. It starts with her being a brick wall in net, but it's also like she's not facing too many shots. And the Colorado defense has been cohesive. They've played together, and that's naturally just created opportunities on the offensive side of things. And in that Denver game and some of these other games where the Buffs only won the game 1-0 with a goal like late in the second half or something. It's just been good defensive play from the opposition as well. But just at a higher volume, just because the Buffs are seem to be creating many more offensive opportunities in comparison to their opponents. And you know it's been outside of just like literally the 3 minutes that it took to lose to Northern Colorado. North Carolina, rather, outside of those 3 minutes, they've pretty much played, the perfect season so far. It hasn't been, pretty at every aspect. No team ever is, even in their season opener, Danny Sanchez was like, "Oh, we didn't play like we did," and I was much happier, that weekend, um, with his team's play, and so, you know, really just all around, it starts with the defense. They played well and it's just led to offensive opportunities that they've been able to capitalize on. And it's been great to see, Shira James showing up, of course, as we expected, with their all-time record. The captains have all played well with, Jordan Knights, Juliana Hayward, and Rachel Rosen, and, the sophomores, Hope Leba and Ava Priest, they've been key offensive players, whether it's scoring the ball or setting up others. And so, I think they're at a really good pace or at a really good place. And, soccer is one of those ones that can kind of go up and down a little bit, as Denny Sanchez likes to say. He says things kind of, level out and throughout the season. But, you know, at this point, the world is theirs and you know, I guess I'm just waiting for, a Colorado Buffaloes meltdown.
Well, I mean, the soccer team they did make the NCAA tournament last year, and hopefully they're able to build on that as some of the other teams have done before. But it's important to know. I'm just looking through their schedule. They haven't allowed a goal where like the North Carolina game has kind of been an exception because the only games where they've allowed more than one goal in a game have been a 4-3 win and the 2-3 loss. So they've just been lights out defensively. They haven't allowed a goal since August 22nd against Wyoming. So, and that was the game in which they won 5-1. Like that wasn't that significant. So they've been able to really lock in when they've needed to on defense, besides sort of, I wouldn't call it a fluke. It was just a meltdown against North Carolina. But this is a team that's really stepping into the brunt of the upper echelon of the national um spotlight. So I think with the Big 12 schedule starting up, it's going to be really, really interesting to see if that can carry on. So I think they kick off in about 4.5 hours against K-State on the road. They haven't played too many road games so far, but it's going to be cool to see if they can take on this road trip, which they don't come back home till September 26th. So they got 2 weeks on the road against some of these Big 12 opponents and to try to prove their worth, kind of be able to build on some of the offensive struggles of last year. Though that they've seen a lot of late goals, a lot of set pieces, but can they find success in the open play? In open plays was what I'm looking to see if they can do as the season goes on. Um, just with some of the influx of youth with Priest and Leba, but also with the experience. Shower James seems to be a lock to score pretty much every game, but if she's not, who else can step up? Some of those more experienced members like Juliana Hayward, um, and Rachel Rosen, who can really step in and take on the challenges that the Buffs are going to inevitably face as the season wears on and they face some of these newer opponents that they haven't seen much of. And I think it's going to be really cool to see.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that is like worth mentioning is that in the the 4-3 game against North Texas, I'm pretty sure that was an exhibition. So I there was, there
Good.
both teams were playing a lot of players. All three goalkeepers played. Um, and so I'm not sure if Jordan Knights even gave up a goal in that game. And then even in the Wyoming game, like you mentioned, it was 5-1, and I'm pretty sure the that one goal was after Knights had been subbed out of the game and the backup keeper was in. So I mean, like that's just going a step further to kind of show Knights is you know dominance in net. I mean, she's
Well, it
really
means he hasn't allowed a goal since the North Carolina game.
yeah. I mean that would be the only game she's given up goals is the North Carolina game. Um, and honestly, like those last two that she did give up, it was giving up goals isn't just like a goalkeeper thing. Like obviously, like a goalkeeper if they're out of position, there's some it's not like they're immune to not making they're immune to bad plays, but it is a cohesive thing. You know, between the defense or among the defense, and just late in that game, North Carolina just was able to break down the Colorado defense, force some quick opportunities, and you know while the same girl, I forget her name, scored both goals and had to step up and make the plays. Like they were a little fluky. There's so many times where, the ball is, kind of bouncing around the net like that. And even multiple times in that game where, Colorado probably had a chance to score in a similar play. Like North Carolina probably had a chance to score earlier in that game on similar plays, but, they just happened to score back to back, which, I think I mean, first off, I don't want, anyone, I'm not discrediting North Carolina to do what they do. Definitely to do what they did in that Colorado game definitely shows, why they're ranked as highly as they are. But on the other hand, I think there is some, you know, to give Jordan Knights the benefit of the doubt, at least for that one performance, to, even to just show her dominance. Like, it's not like those were plays where she was out of position or something like that. Like they were definitely, well earned goals by a hardworking team and or maybe not well earned, but just, just kind of I'm not a soccer person, so I'm trying to find the words, but they were more fluky, I guess, a little, kind of junky, kind of hard, more 50-50 ball for lack of a better way of putting it. And they happen Jordan Knights and the Buffs happen to be on the, you know, unfortunate end in the North Carolina game. So I guess that's worth mentioning. But
Yeah, no, it is. But I do think, the season has been a massive success so far. They got off to a really red hot start last year. So we'll look to see with a new conference, kind of maybe a little bit of an easier conference in terms of soccer programs. We'll see if the Buffs can keep it going. And so I guess we'll touch on volleyball as well. Not not in a great spot right now after last night. A loss to Northern Colorado, which I don't know when the last time any of our varsity teams lost to Northern Colorado in anything, but pretty important to note. The coach, coaching was not too pleased with the result, and though it was a 2-1 effort at the Buffs Classic against Georgia, Fresno State, and Washington, that Washington game was a game where they had it in hand and let three straight sets go by them. So after a pretty decent start as well, they're kind of in a rough spot. If you had any thoughts on that really quick.
Yeah, I mean, I think just at this point, like, I don't know, unfortunately, I haven't been able to, cover a game yet, and I haven't, like, I don't know, I haven't kept up too much with them. That's more, Patrick's been a lot on that, but, you know, from being at the media day and hearing Jesse Mahoney speak and hearing the other players speak, there was a lot of emphasis on the youth of the team, um, and, getting through some of those learning curves. Um, and, I think just, unfortunately, some of these losses I think are just, coming at the just, coming at the helm of that because I don't know. This team is young. They have, time. They're gonna have time to, put get this unit working together and work out some kinks. And so, you know, I think it's probably, like I said, I didn't watch, so I can't say, exactly what went wrong if there was a change in attitude. But, you know, at least last night, from what I heard, it was really sloppy. They were undisciplined, a lot of, violations and things like that. And I think, like I said, it just, kind of comes from them being a younger team and while obviously sucks to, for them to go through these losses, like, maybe it is like a little bit of a wake up call. And can kind of show them early on in the season that even though you are young and you are talented and you have room and like you have the time to put things together, like I don't know, you do need it, like, not that they weren't taking it serious or anything like that. I'm sure every player was playing as hard as they could, but you know there does need to be the discipline. There does need to be you know this focus to play a full to win 3 sets and not two. You because in a few cases, when the Buffs win a set, a lot of times like it's looked really good, it's looked really dominant, and then the next set would just be completely different, and you're like, how is this even the same team? How has the attitude changed that drastically? And so I don't know. I guess it's more just about taking it on a match by match basis instead of a set by set thing, and I don't know, understanding that you know that just because you've been successful on in a set or on a play or won a point, it doesn't mean you know you can give up on the next one. Not saying that that's necessarily what they're doing, but they just need to lock in a little bit more by the sounds of things, especially with Jesse Mahoney's comments that you mentioned a little bit earlier.
Yeah, no, I think it's just when you have a young team, you're going to have inconsistencies. You're going to be streaky at times. So I think there's a lot to that. We'll see if they can start to work out those inconsistencies against why or no, that's so they have another invitational, the UC Irvine Invitational on tomorrow. So they got to make a quick turnaround in the event center. Um, and we'll see if they can do that. And I guess it's about all we have for varsity sports. Still waiting on some basketball stuff. Harrison Carrington making the last scholarship spot for men's.
Yeah, I
Um,
want to say that I think that is a great decision. Um,
okay.
just because in a year like this where the Buffs aren't expected to be good, um, I definitely think it's worth using that final spot on a guy who's more than deserving, especially after he had to step up last year and kind of in a really dire time as far as injuries on the men's basketball side of things. So I just wanted to say I thought that move was smart. Builds the team morale, shows players that Tad cares about them, which he does a great amount, and you know it would have been obviously it would have been neat, of course, oh yeah, Tad Boyle all of a sudden gets random 5-star recruit like it's CFB 25 or something, but
Yeah.
but at this point, I don't think they were going to necessarily find anybody to give it to, and so I think Harrison is deserving of it, and yeah, no, I just thought that was a good thing. I wanted to say that real quick.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, you're the guy that follows him really well, so you know much more than a lot of other people. I think it was a good move also. I didn't even know they had a scholarship spot still open. So, and then moving on to just some last thing we'll go over really quick is just the baseball team in the state of club baseball, which starts up in just a few short weeks on September 28th against Air Force. They start their fall schedule. Obviously, really low stakes games, and it's still in a very low stakes part of their season. But they don't have a coach yet, which is really important. Um, Matt Spivak, one of our amazing writers we have going on right now, is went to a scrimmage they had recently, talked to a lot of their players, their non-existent coaches, I guess, and found that out for himself. Um, but I do think, Colin Reynolds, the coach last year, he left the program in a really good spot. Even though it was a bit of a down year, obviously brought the Buffs to the National Collegiate or Club Baseball World Series. And I think team still has a lot of talent. Nathan Hoffman, Blake Carey is gone, but I believe I'm trying to think some good pitchers like Matt Longstreet as well. So I think the team has a lot of talent, but they can start building up their youth as Andrew Garcia, I cannot forget, is now the president of the team, and he's a huge power bat. So I think team has a lot of different multi-talented players. So I think we'll get to see soon in the fall season, which we'll get to soon. We'll be broadcasting all those games on our YouTube if they can persevere through some of this adversity, dealing without a coach, still having to practice and stuff, and put together a nice little fall season.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be, something interesting. I think I don't know. Well, obviously it's a little nerve-wracking to not have a coach. I think it's opportunity um, you know, for a team to have to learn one another and who plays together and learn how to be, unselfish and think about the team more than yourselves because, I'm sure there's gonna be a point where, they need to see who's gonna, play left field or something and it's between two guys and how are you going to, decide? Like, obviously, Andrew Garcia has been around as the president. I'm sure, you listen to him, and he has that. He's kind of deserved that, that voice as a leader on that baseball team. But, on the other hand, that's also a teammate. And, while he deserves some of that respect, it'll also be tough, when it comes down to things and players are fighting for a position. So I think it'll be really, really interesting to see how this fall unfolds and, how this team is able to work around those things and if they are able to turn this into a good thing so that, if someone does end up taking over as an actual head coach and it's not, like a Bill Russell situation or something where it's, player coach, but
Better coach would be wild. I think that could be possible just because it's club. Um, but yeah, that would be pretty crazy to watch.
yeah, but I don't know. I think that'll be fun to see. It'll be fun to learn the new names on the team, see some of the new guys, see if the bullpen is in the pitching really overall is improved. I think that would be a big emphasis and you know in fall ball this year. I just see where that is because the bats always kind of seem to deliver. Um, but kind of from there, I mean, we got other club sports are rolling. Club hockey as usual. Uh, club soccer. Me and Harrison did the one game last year, but we're doing more. Doing more this year, and
I'll be there
you know,
this weekend, actually.
sweet. Well, yeah. I mean, unfortunately, I won't do the COVID, but
Right.
but I'll get better soon. And as always, we have Nick Evans running around doing his thing. Making sure
Running
all the
around too
broadcasts are
much,
going.
honestly. That dude puts in so much work.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. But yeah, more volleyball this weekend. So I mean, that's some of the home coverage we have for some of our new members. Soccer, of course, on the road. Um, so you know, I think I'm gonna write about that. And then we have only two members heading to Colorado State. CSU does not have the inventory to welcome more than two CU media members for organization. Maybe it depends on the organization. I can't be too salty, but after my experience last year of at the basketball game where we didn't get credentials or Wi-Fi or a spot that wasn't touching the ceiling, uh I feel like I'm somewhat justified in my
I agree.
my grievances with CSU, I guess.
I do. I
Never
do.
mind the rivalry.
Yeah. No, I mean, we'll see all that play out soon. I know there's volleyball. We're gonna be traveling to Fort Collins too, but see how that goes.
Yeah, that's next
That's
week. So
just about all we got.
yeah. So I mean, as always, I'm Oliver Hayes,
I'm Harrison Simeon.
and you heard it here first. Peace.